Minecraft's Wither brings nothing but death and destruction. Its twisted appearance, the result of a tragic past. Desperate to protect his family, a weak player named Willem was in search of a legendary power. Venturing into an ancient burial ground, he discovered an old book and found instructions for a sacred statue. Using strange black skulls and dark sand scattered around the graves, he completed his creation. Suddenly, the blocks began to howl out in agony as he was sucked into the ancient build. Transforming, intense pain raged through his veins. His mind splitting into thirds, Willem was terrified of the monster he had become. He thrashed about before suddenly shooting out an explosive blast. His vision became clouded as his suffering was replaced with a feeling of power. Adjusting to his new reality, Willem explored his abilities. He quickly realized the devastating power of his explosions and the speed of his flight. Testing his limits, he hunted a group of animals for their meat with ease. His family had been starved for food, but now he had enough to last weeks. Finally, he would be able to provide for his wife and his son. Eager to share his new discovery, he hurried home. Calling out, his wife approached, only to be met with a horrible creature. Terrified, she screamed out. Willem tried to comfort her and explained that he was still the same man, but she refused to believe the reality in front of her.
No, you're not my husband. How could you be?
Suddenly falling ill, Willem's heart sank in horror as he saw her squirming in pain before dying in front of his eyes. In a panic, he let out another explosive blast, completely destroying his home and withering the blocks around it.
What is happening?
Watching from a distance was Willem's son. Scared of the monster that had killed his mother, he ran away, heartbroken. Following the tragic event at his home, the tormented Wither searched far and wide for his missing son. He was the last thing that Willem cared about. Unable to find him and still struggling with his grief, he decided to find shelter and rest. Arriving at the nearest village, however, he noticed that crops were beginning to wither and the villagers were falling over ill, same as his wife. Willem looked around, then at himself, and realized his new body must be the cause of all of this horrible suffering around him. Panic spread throughout the village as the once peaceful community was disrupted by the wave of death. Seeing Willem, the golems and some nearby players banded together to fight, but their efforts were futile. Angered by their attacks, he slaughtered them in an instant, his explosive power too great for them to withstand. Horrified at the pain he was causing, Willem hastily flew away. With his new body, no one would ever accept him again. All he did was destroy everything he touched. It was then that he was reminded of a legend older than time itself, the Farlands. It was said to be the home of monsters. Surely there he would find understanding, and maybe even a way to reverse his affliction. Then he could return to his son. And so he began his search for the Farlands. As he traveled, both players and mobs continued to attack him relentlessly, but Willem persevered and eventually found the mythical lands. However, his stay was short-lived. Just as soon as he had entered, he was suddenly ejected from the towering walls. Confused, he found himself floating outside of the boundary. He became frustrated and again tried to enter, but felt a powerful force blocking his path before a mysterious cloaked figure appeared.
You are too dangerous for these lands, beast. Your very existence upsets the balance of life and death.
Willem couldn't believe his ears. Even this ancient and mythical place would turn its back on him? Desperate, Willem explained that he had nowhere else to go. The cloaked man seemed to stop and think for a moment. Nodding his head, he revealed to Willem the location of an ancient Wither temple that was said to hold an item that could change him back. Grateful, Willem thanked the man for his help and rushed off in excitement.
You fool.
Determined to regain his humanity, Willem traveled for days towards the location the man had provided him. As he got closer, however, his path became covered in a thick fog. He noticed soul sand littering the ground and could hear terrible screams echoing from the blocks. Suddenly, in a flash of light, Willem was face to face with his wife. She appeared angered by the transformation he had undergone. Willem, heartbroken, explained that he only did it to protect her and their son, but she rejected him once again.
You failed us, Willem. You're nothing but a monster.
Panicking and filled with regret, Willem let out a thunderous roar that pushed the soul fog away. As the surroundings cleared, he finally found himself standing in front of the Wither Temple. Gathering his courage, he ventured inside to find a strange item floating on a pedestal. The Wither Totem. Grabbing the totem, Willem concentrated and activated its power. He was hit with a sharp, searing pain as he felt his body changing. However, instead of returning to his human form, his 3 heads started to split into 6. Horrified, the pain was becoming unbearable, and Willem realized that he would soon die from this transformation. In a last-ditch effort to save himself, he threw the totem on the ground and blasted it to pieces, managing to reverse the transformation just in time. Furious and disillusioned that the artifact didn't work as he had hoped, Willem rushed back to the Farlands. Upon his return, the cloaked figure reappeared and was surprised to see that Willem was still alive. Consumed by rage, Willem shot a blast at the cloaked figure. The man screamed out as his body became stained black and withered away. Suddenly, the magical barrier around the Farlands shattered, and Willem forced his way inside. He attacked everything in sight and demolished the landscape until he eventually came across a strange, glowing structure carved into the wall. It seemed to be calling out to him. Driven by curiosity and desperation, he entered through it and found himself in a hellish dimension. Feeling stuck, he wandered aimlessly for years, hoping for any change in his life. He began to believe that his son was better off without him and became increasingly more lonely, until one day he stumbled across a valley filled with soul sand and bone. An idea began to form in his mind. Maybe he could create another Wither. Surely then he would be understood. Finally, for the first time in ages, Willem felt a glimmer of hope. He hastily left the Nether and returned to the ancient burial site. Then, in the same spot where he had first transformed, created another statue. However, as soon as this new Wither was born, it immediately attacked Willem. Willem desperately tried to reason with it, but any attempt was useless. This Wither was nothing but an empty shell of hatred and suffering. In the heat of the battle, they nearly killed each other, but Willem managed to outmaneuver the other and finish it off. Overwhelmed, Willem flew away, while a group of curious players entered the graveyard. One of them noticed a sparkling item where the Wither had fallen and walked over to pick it up. A Nether Star. Little did they know, but this powerful gem would soon change the very fabric of Minecraft. After narrowly escaping death by the other Wither, Willem had lost his last hope. All he wanted was to protect his family, and now he had no one, and he began to view his life as cruel and unfair. Meanwhile, as players crafted the first beacon and realized its power, they immediately began hunting for any trace of the Wither to gain a second Nether Star. Their relentless attacks eventually brought Willem's fury to its peak, and he turned against the whole overworld.
If everyone's gonna hate me, then I'll give them a reason to!
It didn't matter if it was a player or a mob. Everything in sight withered away under the might of Willem's power. Even whole biomes would rot, and over time, these would eventually become the vast desert landscapes we know today. While some players hunted Willem for his Nether Star, others hunted him out of fear. Among these hunters was Willem's son, still bitter from his mother's death and determined to avenge her. Willem was growing more powerful by the day, and if he wasn't stopped, there would be nothing left. Banding together, they came up with a plan to lure the beast and lit their beacon. Noticing the beam of light, Willem curiously followed it, eventually finding himself in a clearing, only to be surrounded by a large group of players. That was when Willem's son confronted him, unaware that this monster was his father.
Give up, foul demon! I shall avenge my mother!
Snapping back to reality, Willem recognized his son's voice and tried to communicate.
No, son! It's me, your father.
Taken aback, the son hesitated. He believed that his father had abandoned him after his mother's death and had grown to hate him. But in reality, he had been the one to kill her?
How could you?
Filled with fury, the son swung his sword, fiercely striking his father. Willem couldn't bear to fight his own child and staggered back. Seeing the son's attack, every player then unleashed a volley of arrows at the Wither. Screaming out, Willem flew away in an attempt to save himself. But his son wasn't going to give up on his lifelong dream of revenge. Chasing after the Wither, he bobbed and weaved through the trees before finding himself back at his childhood home. Cautiously entering inside, he found his father and inched closer, ready to deal the final blow. Willem turned towards his son, filled with sadness. This was the end.
I'm sorry.
Struck down, Willem's soul broke free of his Wither body, and as he floated away, he looked at his son with love and sorrow, hoping that one day he would find peace and understanding. However, the mystical powers that bound Willem were not finished with him yet. Suddenly dragged under the earth, he fell through block after block, eventually breaking through the bedrock right into the Nether. Smashing against nether brick, he looked up in a daze as Wither skeletons surrounded him. Confused, he got up to see the cloaked figure from the Farlands reappear.
You're not getting out of it that easily.
Thinking he had killed the man, Willem demanded to know what was going on as another Wither statue suddenly materialized in front of him. The man then placed the final skull, and the blocks again howled out in agony as Willem was sucked into a new Wither.
No!
The Nether, amplifying his transformation, broke the poor player's very soul while the cloaked figure laughed.
No matter how many times you die, your spirit will remain trapped for the rest of eternity.
In a flash of light, Willem found himself back in the ancient burial ground where his suffering had started.